Hey, you guys, I'm thinking about what you should ask your future coaches if you need a program and you need a football coach. Some of the questions that you need to ask ask your fellow uh, football coach that may be wanting to coach. Ask him on a punt return when you send guys down to tackle the punt receiver. What are the steps that you need to tell your tackler that he's running down and he's getting down to the ball carrier who's about ready to catch the ball? What do you need to tell that individual to make ensure that he can get the tackle? Question one. Question two. On a punt, do you have two receivers back to uh, return the ball, or do you have one receiver back? Why would you want two? And what are the advantages of two versus one? And as well, if you have a small school and you're in a very tough conference, one of the toughest conferences in the state, you're a small 1A school, what is the best defense if you're taking over a program that really hasn't been taught much defenses? Of course, a 5-2, you can just look at a 5-2 and it's pretty easy to run. But what about a 4-3? And how would you make that 4-3 adjustable within a second to become a 5-3 or possibly a 6-2? What would be the advantages of a 4-4 defense with a new squad and having a new squad that hadn't much had training with defenses? Which would be the best policy to do on your defense? Do you stunt your linebackers? How would you control your defense? Do you have a scheme that you would run on certain defenses that you have? So give me your rundown on your defensive schemes and schematics. Another question. How wide across is the football field? How can you make a football field and turn it into three segments, each segment being how long, and thus you would know your short side of the field, your long side of the field, and the far side of the field? What would your answer be? Another one. If you're punting the ball, how far back should your safety be or your punter to receive the ball? And how long in seconds would it take for the punter to snap the ball to the kicker from the long snap? Okay, so the long snap snaps it. What is your stopwatch time into the fact that the punter gets it, and how far back should the punter stand to receive that time? Third, on a kick or a field goal, what is the proper setup situation on setting up a kicker or a field goal, and what's the procedure on showing the correct mannerisms and the right stepping to do this? On offense, if you only had so many certain players that were decent, okay, what would probably be the least amount of people that you could probably run a decent offense with? And what number and what positions would you really need to have? We're not talking about having a substitute. We're talking about how many guys that you need to actually have a pretty decent field. Numbering systems on offense. What's your numbering systems on offense? Do you go left to right with the numbering system, or right to left with the numbering system, or keep a left to right numbering system, which is the same? What are the other types of numbering systems? How do you shift from a pro set to a pro set right to a pro set left using numbering system where the numbering system would be the same? Do you believe in gap offensive line, or do you like to have your offensive line tightened together? What is the advantage of having a gapped offensive line versus the advantage of having the offensive line tight? Do you line up your offensive line off the center of the hiker, the center? Uh, would you line up off the heels of his feet, or do you line up on the ball, where the ball is placed? What are two advantages of each placement and each lineman's lineup if you do line up at the ball with the other offensive line up at the ball? Why would you do that, and what's the advantage of that? If you don't and you line up your men on the center, on his heels of his feet, what are the advantage of doing that? Okay, now, how do you run your pass patterns? Do you have certain trees on certain players? Do you have hot audibles? What's your procedure on evaluating your talent? How do you go about playing your best 11 players? And how would you achieve a program to complement each other so that you can complete and have a best 11 players out there? And then again, what can you possibly do with the least amount of talent and work with, and how would you do that? How would you build the program up within 2 or 3 years to compete against a 1A program that's actually probably one of the toughest conferences in the state? And you've got to take over a program that basically hasn't had much coaching for 5 or 6 years. What's your game plan on getting them up to speed, and how would you use the gymnasium, the hash marks, and other methods so that you can train indoors or outdoors depending on the weather? And how would you service your men to get quicker and train faster so that they can catch up with the others? Tackling and drill work. How would you start, since you don't have too many tackling drills in succession and not too many ball players have the methods that are required to tackle effectively? How would you run your practices to set up tackling, and what would you do to help with such so that kids don't get hurt? Next, whenever you're playing, do you consider those individuals on your ball team as your son and your sons and protect them uh, in case, for instance, if you do not have a field to qualify to actually play varsity, would you then kind of maybe ask the other teams to play JV if you do not have the capacity to where your other kids do not get hurt or play against competition that is far above and extreme of what the talent that you have, so that you don't get your players hurt? What are some things that you can do to not get your players hurt, as in conditioning skills and other things that you can help with teaching methods so that people know how to tackle correctly, know what they're doing, and so that the injuries are less possible and that you can not be injured during the seasons? There's certain training requirements, as in cross training and CrossFit and workout and conditioning throughout the seasoning. What are the best exercises for linemen, running backs, and other athletes? And how would you chart them, and how do you chart them with certain methods on the weight program? There's certain weights and certain individual requirements that should be ascertained during a program so that your kids can get into the best possible shape, which would be which of the following exercise and weight room material things that you need to concentrate on. And then how would you then implement that program? 5, boosters, monies, and extra things. What's your ideal on helping get more money into the program so that we can buy better equipment or have um, certain funds? And what's a few things that you would have in store for us so that we can make money? Or do you have any patents, or do you have a library of things? What is your resources so that you could possibly get help through the boosters and set up systems to where you have the monies and the capabilities so that you can have the monies to get the shoes and certain things such as a punter shoe? Has anybody ever bought a punter shoe of the old fashioned and taught how to kick a field goal the old fashioned way? And if not, why not? And not only that, how would you teach the program and what kind of shoe would you need? Okay, offense, direct snap versus the shotgun snap. Would you practice and use both methods? Why would you want to use both methods? Why would you just want to use one method? Why would you want to just use one method with the shotgun? Okay, give me a reason why you would like to use two methods, both of them, and why you would want that program. Why would you want to do direct snap? Why would you want to do shotgun? How would you train people at the center who is snapping the ball? There are several methods to snap the ball during the shotgun formation. Now, I've seen two different methods. I teach one. I don't really prefer the other. And which method do you prefer when you snap the football in a shotgun formation? Which is your favorite defense do you plan to incorporate, and why? Why would one defense be better than another on a new program with guys that really have not had any programs? How can you control that defense from the sideline and call certain stunts and blitz and situations like that? Explain to me what kind of offense or defense that you plan on running, and why the feasibility of running those programs matter. On offense, okay, let's say that you have a say you have a guy that can catch pretty good. You got a good guard. You have a good quarterback, and you have a good running back. Uh, what else would be needed with that besides the center to have a pretty good balanced team? Okay, now do you believe in timing? On what is your timing count on quarterback passing, and not only that, on the hike of the ball? Do you go off of sound, or do you go off the count? There's two different methods that a person can use. They can go in off sound, or you can go off count. And explain to me the difference of those two so that you are aware of why you can go off of sound versus why you can go off of count, and which one matters, and why would you want both during which situations. Okay, are you going to allow your quarterback to run audibles that you have taught him, or to recognize certain fronts? And how would you address how he would be able to run an audible or know how to signal certain plays or players so that there is a hot read or an audible that he can read that would overshadow the play that was just called? 4, 5, 6, 7. Keeps going. What is the angle of the drop from the middle of the field to the sideline? There is a field that is downhill on each crest, and that angle is a certain degree. Do you know what that degree is, and why it would matter if you're practicing throwing the ball around in the gym? How far is the weak side and how far is the far side if the hash marks ball was laid in the hash marks? What's the difference between the hash mark in a high school and colleges? And if you were playing on a college field versus a high school field, The hash marks are different in length. Do you know the length of the hash mark and what the distance would be from the hash mark to the sideline? What is your routes for your pass routes? Do you have certain routes where you go down certain amounts of yardage? And why would you want to incorporate certain yardage and certain route distances? And then again, do you have a tree? How do you organize your trees? What kind of scrimmages and drills would you do in practice to incorporate 3 or 4 passing drills so that you could probably practice 3 or 4 quarterbacks at the same time, plus 3 or 4 receivers at the same time, so that you can evaluate and practice 3 or 4 quarterbacks and 3 or 4 snappers all at the same time, and 3 or 4 receivers all at the same time? What's your methods on training and conditioning to get the men ready? What is the most important conditioning that you need to do so that your kids don't get hurt, especially before games? I'll give you that one. They're they need to be limber and loose. And not only that, they need to be loose and limber also before practice and after practice. Stretching is a very vital function. Okay, you want some more questions for your new coach? How are you going to make it easy for these kids to learn? How are you going to teach your other coaches the methods? Do you have copies and blueprints of offenses and defense that you have in your library? Uh, and what kind of library do you have to show us that you have certain methods and references in the kicking game and the uh, special teams play, onside kicking, certain elements on punt returns to the left, punt returns to the left, right, and the wherewithal. Now, do you know when the ball during the late innings or quarters of the game, does the time stop after you get 15 yards and get a first down? What is your game plan on time management? And tell me what you know about time management and about how timeouts are effectively used during a game and saved during a game, and why would you want to save them or why would you want to use them accordingly. Okay, we did punting. What is the speed of the punter on the long snap? You really want to have a long snapper that punts, that gets the ball back there at a right speed. And if he's got a speed that's under a certain amount of seconds, he could be considered a Division 1 long snapper. How do you teach those methods in practice so that they develop that? Other situations. Do you know what a wishbone is? I formation, empty backfield. How about some of these? Can you show me a offensive pattern that has a well, I'm trying to think of something that's untraditional, an unconventional line. Can you explain to me what an unconventional line is and why you would use it? I mean, the list of questions goes on and on and on. That's just for football. What about safety? Do you know how to wrap a groin injury? Do you know how a hamstring needs to be mended? Do you know how to tape ankles? What about a knee? How do you work with knee damages? What kind of experiences have you had with injuries in your life so that you can share that with your players on treatment and care so that they get the best conditioning and care? How would you start your program in junior high and teach your uh, program from down below and on up so that everything would be more coordinated and that your fellow coaches would know what your program is desirable for and what your purpose is of such and such. Why would you use a 50-yard dash instead of a 40-yard dash when evaluating your players and clocking them and their times? Why is speed important? How do you best effectively use somebody that's big and heavy but can't move very well? What would be the best effective use in the line for him? Do you like to play man-to-man or zone on defense with your pass receivers or your coverages? And how would you protect against a spread offense if they went with an empty set off of your regular defense? And how would you protect against that? Who pays for the balls? Where's your practice balls? Who gets those? Who receives those? Do you have monies in your accounts to get a few practice balls that are brand new? How would you go about ascertaining the funds to do that? How to wear your equipment? How to tie your shoes correctly? The socks, footwear, icing, how to recover from an injury quicker, how not to be playing when you have an injury, how to take care of your players when you only have so many players that are so good that you don't want to get them hurt. How would you practice effectively and not get them hurt during practices and training so that we could field the best team during the games? What's your philosophy and your conditioning plan on that? How would you block on offense if you have a hard rushing uh, line that comes through? How would you block against that? If the guy was in a shotgun or if he's in a direct snap, maybe he's got two backs. How would you block against a hard rushing line? Here's an example. What you would do is cross block. You pull the guard, cross black him across the tight end, and you take the tackle and come in and get the defensive guard and do a cross block. That way, their strength is equaled out with the cross block. I mean, it goes on and on and on. If you want questions so that you can have a qualified football coach at a program that needs one very well and has to compete in one of the best conferences in the state of Illinois. How would you train your quarterback? What's methods for training your quarterback? Do you use wristbands? How do you teach a stop and go on a deep route? How do you teach curls? How do you teach? Do you catch the ball in your hands? Do you use your hands and fingers? Or do you catch the ball in your body? There's two methods and theories about catching the ball as a receiver. Which method do you like? Which method would you prefer? Okay? There's tons and tons of questions that you need to have done and ready. Have you ever ready? Have you ever been ready to take over a program and had it all established but didn't get the job and been ready for years yet never get an interview to go over questions like this because you don't get the chance to get an interview? Yet your home school is an embarrassment to all the schools around. We're tromped on, we're beat up, we got people leaving our schools, yet questions like this, should be answered and should be evaluated to have a coach. I don't care what kind of experience the coach has. Ask him these questions and see what he says. Ask him on a 4-4 defense how that he can make that into a 5-3 with one move. Ask him on a 4-4 defense how he can make that into a 6-2 with one move. Ask him on a 4-4 defense how he can control that whole line and whole linebacker system by 2 or 3 different calls and teach this and have it a very instructive and very effective defense. Yet we can disguise it into a 53 or a 62. all kinds of things. How tight do you want to play your man coverage on defensive backs? How loose do you want to sag off? All kinds of things. That any trick plays, I like to have a trick play for each game, make it kind of interesting for the fans and people listening. So anyway, it's about 25 minutes here. Questions you should ask your coach trying to take over a program that needs a professional coach to get it back into shape. And these are a few questions, okay? Coach Stone, talk to you later. Love y'all. Have a good day. Bye bye.